Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is made possible by
Welcome to another edition of Aging Insight. I'm your host, John Ross, here with my co-host, Lisa Schollmeyer, and we are elder law attorneys, and we deal on a regular basis with the needs of seniors and people with disabilities, and we bring you this program to try to figure out how you can navigate through these years without having any problems, without having to go to a nursing home if you can avoid it, without having to become a burden on your friends and family, and without going broke, just trying to navigate through all of this. And it's a mess. We've been doing quite a few of these episodes, and we do monthly breakfasts out in the community.
Sure.
And we have a radio show that's every Saturday, and rarely do we cover the same topic.
That's right. We haven't run out of things to cover, and we haven't run out of circumstances to talk about.
Yeah, and that should give you some indication of how many different things are involved in this aging process, and concepts that maybe seem pretty simple turn complex when they're not well understood, and you make knee-jerk reactions or shoot from the hip, so to speak. And so today's program is going to be to try to help you make a decision related to who's going to handle stuff for you when you can't. And this could come in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of hats out there that somebody could wear when they're helping you. They might be an agent under a financial power of attorney, an agent under a medical power of attorney. They might be a trustee of a trust.
Right. They might be a co-signer on your bank account.
They might be an executor on your will. They might be your designated burial agent. Bet you probably never even heard of such a thing. And yet there is one out there if you want to appoint somebody.
They might be your designated payee
for
Social Security.
Or veterans benefits. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different positions that somebody might hold in a capacity where they are doing something that you used to could do.
Sure.
And now they're doing it for you.
Well, and the first thing to keep in mind when we talk about somebody doing something for you that you used to could do, either you can make arrangements and select who those people might be, or if you haven't made those selections, then maybe whoever the first person is that steps up to the plate and asks to be appointed to do those things for you becomes the person appointed. And then thirdly, it could be that the guy at the courthouse, a judge, chooses who is going to do things for you. So those folks can step in from a lot of different places, but we always want you to think about that and make your arrangements. So
yeah, oftentimes I give people the parallel. I say, when you watch those cop shows on TV, and they, when they're arresting the guy and they read them their rights, and they say you've got the right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you.
Be careful, we might start talking about law we don't know anything about.
Yeah, that's right. But in this context, the same thing applies. You have the right to make your own decisions ahead of time, but if you don't, those decisions will be made for you. But oftentimes not by people that you would have wanted. Even by people that these may be complete strangers to you, judges, attorneys, government functionaries, and different things. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I don't think there's any question about it that it is a good idea to, ahead of time, while you can, while you have the mental capacity to do so, to put in writing that you're going to, here's who I want to make these various decisions. And these could be different people doing different things, but the point is not whether or not you should do it. I think it's very clear that you should do it.
Right. Right, and you know, one of the fears that a lot of folks have is if they do think about these things in advance and they go ahead and put in writing that if circumstances occur and I can't do these things for myself, you know, naming the persons and individuals you would want to do those things for you. You know, a lot of people fear that if they do this in advance, that they're giving up something, that they're somehow giving up a little bit of their power to do those things that they're doing right now, you know, paying their bills, investing their money, you know, choosing what kind of health care and what doctors and all they want to see, you know, but by just making known your wishes in the event that you are unable to do some things for yourself, that does not in and of itself give up any of your power today at the time you make those choices. So I just want to make that very clear to our audience out there.
Yeah, and that is a common misunderstanding. You know, I've had kids who have brought mom into the office, and they're saying, you know, we need to get a power of attorney for mom, and I can tell that mom is very hesitant. I've even had mom sitting there crying. And when I finally get around to asking her what is so upsetting
in private,
yes, and I get around to asking her what is so upsetting, she's thinking that she has reached that point in her life where she's got to give up everything, and that she won't be able to independently manage her finances or decide where she lives, that the time has finally come.
And now the kids are going to make those decisions.
Right. And when I explain to her that what we're doing is we're saying, you know, here's who can do it if you can't. And that if they're not doing it the way you want, fire them.
Yes.
That's exactly right. And then all of a sudden she gets it.
Right.
And I explain, well, you know, because it's either you decide ahead of time or it's going to be some court or something that decides for you. But once we've gotten to that point, then we get to the real nuts and bolts of it.
And what we really want to get into today is how to choose and who to choose, and more importantly, maybe who not to choose as those folks that would help you later on if you need some help in these areas. So.
Yeah. That's going to be our topic today, but to get into the meats and bones of it, you're going to have to stick around until after this break. So hold on and come back in just a second with some good information.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
I'm so glad we found the Wadley Senior Clinic. Their team specializes in caring for older adults, and their doctors listen and work with me to keep me healthy and independent. With monthly educational programs, x-ray and lab, and state-of-the-art exam rooms, I get expert care and understanding about what I'm going through. Best yet, they're easy to get to right off the interstate at Jefferson. See what Wadley Senior Clinic can do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I am Lisa Scholmeyer, and I'm here with John Ross, and we are elder law attorneys here in the Arklatex area. And today we're talking about picking your team. Who's going to be on your team when you need some help? And that help may be needed in the area of finances or dealing with insurance or supplemental insurance policies. that help may be needed in dealing with a hospital bill or with your doctor's office, or dealing with where your Social Security check should be deposited. So those needs for assistance could come in any of those places. And we talked in our first segment about how, you ought to make some decisions and choices while you're at your highest and best to make those choices now. That doesn't give any of your power away now, but it makes it known who you want to assist later on if you ever need it. But there are some things to consider about who you choose to assist you should you ever need it. And John, this is an area where a lot of folks stick with, what they think is traditional or what they think is expected of them. And
or they've been bullied.
Or they've been bullied, yes. So,
so the first thing in all of this, before we actually get into who you appoint and how you do it, the first thing is oftentimes we're talking about family.
Sure.
In most cases, people are talking about, do they appoint their spouse? Do they appoint their kids? If they have more than one kid, how do they appoint those kids and things like that? My first piece of advice here, though, is to have a very honest assessment with yourself.
Yes, that internal assessment.
Be very honest about who these people are and what you know about them, especially when it comes to your children.
Right. As parents, we always hope for the best for our children. We always, a lot of times we kind of gloss over our children's failings or, some of the more negative things about themselves or their personalities. And as a parent, we try to overlook that because, we're the parent. So of course we're going to love our children. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not saying that you don't necessarily love your children any less, but there are things about your children. You may have a child that never gives a thought in the world to tomorrow and never makes a plan in advance. And that personality quirk in that child has caused that child to run into financial emergencies or, things that really shouldn't have happened with a little bit of forethought. And, you need to take that into account.
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day with a lady, and we were talking about medical power of attorney and having somebody who could make medical decisions. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I have a sister. My sister and I really get along very well. She said, but my sister is a billing officer at a doctor's office. Mm-hmm. And she inputs all of the codes for all of the different diseases.
Goodness.
Now, she's got no medical training whatsoever, but because of her exposure to all these different diseases, she thinks everybody has every disease on the planet. And she's become kind of a hypochondriac, thinking that every cold is Ebola. Right. And she was like, so, again, that's an honest assessment of who that person is. And that may not be the right person to make medical decisions because they don't have the calm, level-headed, good sense. They're more reactionary. So the first thing is have an honest assessment. But really, when you're talking about appointing people, you can start breaking it down almost into one of 4 different types of categories. And the first category in this would be having people appointed in some sort of priority order. So, for example, you might appoint person 1, but if person 1 can't do it, then person 2. And if person 2 can't do it, then person 3. So you have this very distinct order. 1, then 2, then 3. Now, there's some good sides to this. That person in priority 1, they are clearly in charge, which means whatever they decide, their decision goes. And so that's a good way to make sure you've got one person, and if you've got this one person that's the single number one person that you would trust to do everything, then that may be a good option. 1, 2, 3. On the other hand, this can have some downfalls. Like, for example, maybe you've got 3 kids and you trust them all and they all live in different places and you're routinely traveling from one to the other and you're just a nomad rolling across this great nation. But if only one of them has the power to do things, and you're visiting the other.
Right, and an accident or a health crisis occurs, then what?
Right, so if you've got one person who's clearly in charge, that's fine as long as that one person is available. And if that one person is not available, they're not dead, they're not incapacitated, they're just on a cruise.
Right. So.
And you can't reach them. And so it's possible that when you have that order of importance like that the person you've picked is just unavailable, and that can cause problems. The other thing is sometimes you can get some hurt feelings in this.
Right. You know, a lot of parents, for some reason, a lot of folks want to choose their children to assist them, and they choose those children in the order of age. And, you know, really there's no other rhyme or reason to it other than they picked the oldest first. And, you know, that's the way a lot of folks think traditionally to do it, but we don't think that that's the way to do it at all. If the oldest child is the child that you have the most confidence in and who is the most helpful, great. But, you know, sometimes another child in a different birth order is a child you're closer to, or that is more available, or is just more knowledgeable about health issues, etc. And that's who you should put first. So.
Yeah, you know, classic example is I had a lady and she had 2 kids. One of them was an accountant and one of them was a nurse. And she put the accountant as the first priority on the financial power of attorney, with the nurse as an alternate, just in case. And she had the nurse as the first priority on the medical power of attorney, with the accountant as the alternate. Right. And that makes pretty good sense. But that was going to be very specific to her, and you've got to do it specific to you. So that's option 1. You have this order of importance. Option 2 then is where you have co-agents, but those co-agents can act independently. So this is more for that situation that I described where you've got 3 kids, they all get along great, they all communicate well, and you're comfortable with any one of them being able to do stuff for you. And in this case, you might say, well, I appoint person A, person B, and person C, any one of which, acting alone, can handle whatever needs to be done for me should I not be able to do it. And this is by far the most convenient.
Right. It's super convenient because, you know, it's very likely that one of those people is going to be available at that time of an emergency. And we don't have to worry about where the other 2 folks are. I mean, you know, one person can act and take care of business.
But it could be any one of the one persons, you know, so you've got multiple. Now, also, by and large, the most risk for problems.
Sure, because if you have a child that sort of takes this as a signal that they are in charge, that they can do things, you know, again, any of these persons can act independently. So if you have someone that, you know, acts, you know, goes rogue or, you know, acts against your interests, there's no checks and balances on it.
Right. And even if they all get along, but you've got a child in Los Angeles who's writing a check for your utilities, and child in Charlotte, North Carolina, writing a check for the exact same bill, and then next month your account's overdrawn because those 2 people didn't talk to each other.
Right.
They may get along wonderfully, but if they're not communicating and working together, even though they have independent authority, that can be a problem. So that's option number 2. Now, there's 2 more options, but we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll tell you about those. So stick around.
The Wadley Senior Clinic has been such a blessing for our family. Because they specialize in geriatric care, they take the time to really focus on Dad's needs. Their exam rooms are specially designed for seniors, and they offer lab and x-ray on site. With monthly educational programs on health and wellness of the mind and body, our healthcare questions get answered. Best of all, they accept Dad's Medicare benefits. See what the Wadley Senior Clinic can do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, Our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. Today we've been talking about how do you name individuals in positions of authority, like naming somebody on a power of attorney, naming somebody on a medical power of attorney, trustee, executor, things like that. And we started out that option 1 is that you have an order of priority. So I appoint person 1, then person 2, then person 3. Option number 2 is you have multiple agents, any one of which can do it. So I appoint person 1, person 2, and person 3, any one of which, acting alone, can do whatever needs to be done.
Acting independently, sure.
Now, the third option would be I've got co-agents
that have to act together.
Right.
And, you know, so here, let's just stick with the 3 children situation here. So here we appoint person 1, person 2, and person 3 to assist that senior, but they all have to act together. Well, John, how does that work when, you know, we need to transfer some money or we need to sell some property? You know, what are
what you have created is a problem, because it takes 2 people or 3 people or however many co's there are. It takes all of them to do something. And that means it takes, if there's 3 people, it takes 3 people to sign a check.
3 signatures.
It takes 3 people to talk to the phone company. It takes 3 people to do everything. And essentially, if those 3 people get along and they work well together, then you have overburdened them.
Sure.
If they don't get along, do you honestly believe that forcing them to work together will be the solution to that problem? And if you do, you're wrong.
Right. So, you know, in this situation, we've had folks say, well, you know, my son and daughter don't really get along, but I love them and trust them both. They just have issues with each other. So I'm going to list them as agents to make medical decisions for me or to, you know, make financial decisions. But because I know that my son and daughter don't really like each other, don't really trust each other, I'm going to make it where they have to act together so that there's transparency and information flowing back and forth between the 2 of them, and that way there's no room for distrust. The problem is, in a fairy tale land, it would work that way, but unfortunately what you've really set up is if the daughter suggests one avenue, then the son is automatically going to say no, he doesn't agree with it, and he won't sign or do whatever's necessary to move forward. And so now we're all at a standstill and nothing is happening, and we really haven't accomplished anything by selecting some folks, you know, in advance to assist us in our senior years that when we need it. So as a general rule, I find selecting co-agents that are forced to act together to be very inconvenient at best and paralyzing at worst.
Yeah, it's generally a bad option. Oftentimes, if you have that sort of circumstance, there are other ways. You know, a lot of times I'll get that and they'll say, well, I want my son to do it, but I'm afraid he'll keep my daughter out of the loop. In which case, if you want the son to do it and you trust that he'll do a good job, it would be more appropriate to appoint the son.
Sure.
But then you might build into that document that he does in fact have to provide her an accounting of the finances,
send the bank statements
or
something.
send copies of medical records or whatever it is. So there's ways you can tweak it without having to force them to work together. And the really, although it's oftentimes I say those are the 3 options, there really is kind of a 4th option out there. Because so far we've been talking about in terms of, you know, my kids or, you know, or my spouse or things like that. But there really is a 4th option, and that is to find some sort of independent third party. Now, this could be other individuals, like friends and family or stuff like that,
Sure.
but really what I'm talking about are professionals.
Right. So, you know, for instance, banks, if they have a trust department, they can do something such as management accounts, where at the point that you can't handle your finances as well any longer, the trust department essentially, pays your bills and puts funds into your account for your grocery money and personal needs and such. But make sure that the utilities stay on and the mortgage gets paid and the supplemental insurance premium gets paid. And now we don't have the kids in your business, and we've got a professional that takes care of the business at hand.
Yeah, and you can even do that oftentimes without a full-blown trust agreement. There
Right.
are what are called agency agreements and things that you can do right there at the bank. Now, trust agreements are typically a better way of doing it for that sort of thing. Same thing with medical decisions. Oftentimes there are professional geriatric care managers. I've even had clients who had a long-standing relationship with their physician, and because they had no family, their physician was actually willing to be on that medical power of attorney to make medical decisions for them. So that's the kind of the fourth option. So the key to all of this is, one, you definitely need to do it.
Right.
Two, be very honest in how you do it, and once you've been very honest about it, then you'll pick one of these essentially four options, and really probably either the first, the second, or the fourth option, because the third one's not any good. It's an option, it's just not a good option.
Yeah,
but hopefully, ultimately, you'll just get it done. That's the key. And like everything else that we do on this program, it's here to provide you that information, and there's lots more information if you'll just keep tuning in, because we'll be back with another episode next week.
That's right. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you then on Aging Insight.
That's right. So see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is made possible by